Welcome to our emotional health seminar. Last week, a lot of people said to me, Pastor, I was really blessed with Dr. David's presentation. She spoke about the brain and how to keep the brain healthy. Last week, I made sure that I slept a lot. And I'm sure my brain is much healthier than it was before. Today, we have with us, via the beautiful island, I'm sure Sister Elaine is going to agree with me, beautiful island of Barbados, we have with us Dr. Peter Roach. Dr. Peter Roach is a GP. He has been working for 15 years. I know he has been trained in Cuba, / the West Indies, / UK. So he's a man of wide experience. I remember some time ago when my daughter had a bit of a problem, and I took the phone and I said, Dr. Roach, I need your help. I'd gone to other GPs before and nothing happened. And my daughter just listened to Dr. Roach, and after that she was up walking and running. So Dr. Roach is a very, very, very close friend of mine. So Dr. Roach, let me welcome you to our emotional health seminar. And I'm sure as you talk to us about blood pressure, I hope my blood pressure will be calm at the end of this, or it should be at the right level. So welcome to those online. Invite your friends. We'll start with a prayer, and then after that, the voice you'll be hearing is that of Dr. Roach. Remember, you can ask your question online, and Dr. Roach will seek to answer them. Let's have a prayer. Father, we thank you for today. As we start our emotional health seminar with Dr. Peter Roach, I'm sure that today we will be blessed. Amen.
Amen. Well, good afternoon to everyone. I hope you had a good lunch and pleasant Sabbath. I have been working for about close to 15 years, but I'm a newly qualified GP. I just have to make sure I get that right. I've not been a GP in England for 15 years. Today, the topic we're looking to tackle is high blood pressure. High blood pressure. And you would see from the first slide, everyone always asks the question, am I at risk? And before we get into whether or not you are at risk, we will then seek to tackle what normally happens. So, you should see on your screen just a diagram of the circulatory system of the body. And I'm going to keep this reasonably simple because I do not know the range of the public. Some will be very deep in knowledge in relation to biology and medicine. Others will be very novice. So we'll keep it as simple as possible so that everyone can follow. So in this circulatory system, you would see that you have red and blue vessels on that picture, and they cover all regions of the body. The red is for the arteries, and the blue is for the veins. And the arteries, which are the red ones, normally carry blood at a higher pressure than the vessels that are blue. And it covers the entire body for you to get oxygen and for you to take away any impurities such as carbon dioxide from all regions of the body and excreted via the lungs. And this is a more simplified version of that, where you can see the central organ working here is the heart. And this is responsible for pumping the blood all around the body, the heart. And it's a very, very important organ because that blood have no other way of getting around the body except from the pump of this organ. It covers the lungs, and you can see the lungs work intricately with the heart, where they take in the oxygenated blood, that's blood with oxygen, and it's siphoned around the body, and then it comes back to the heart, sent back to the lungs, exchange takes place, etc. It takes to the head, the heart, the liver, the arms, all around the body. Very important you understand this. But blood pressure has to deal with the pressure within these blood vessels that is going around the body. So, what is the blood pressure then? So, in as basic form as possible, is the force or the push of your blood on the walls of your arteries. Now, some of you may have gardens at home, and when you turn on your hose pipe, you will see that the water fills up the hose pipe and it becomes very firm. That's the pressure inside the hose. And when you open the top of the hose, out comes the water. But if you could squeeze that hose pipe very easily, it would mean that it didn't have a high enough pressure and the water wouldn't go very far when you open the pipe. Sometimes we don't have a tap to control the hose, so we bend the hose to control the water, and you would realize the water flow stops. And I want you to think about this hose pipe as your blood vessel. Pressure in the hose pipe makes it firm, no pressure makes it soft. And that pressure, that blood, that water must flow through the hose pipe, blood must flow through the blood vessels. And that pressure that the water is putting on the hose pipe is the same way the blood puts pressure on the blood vessels as it goes through, and that is the blood pressure we're talking about. Now, briefly, we will talk about systolic and diastolic pressure, and in the medical field and nursing and anybody who takes blood pressure, we'll always talk about systolic and diastolic blood pressure. And the one of great importance, all of them are important, but one that we look at immediately that jump out at you is the top number. That's the systolic blood pressure, when your heart contracts and forces that blood out through the blood vessels. That's the systolic blood pressure, and that's the pressure acting on the walls. Now, if that pressure, the heart forcing the blood into the blood vessels, it requires more force. That means the pressure is going to be higher. It requires more force to push that blood into the blood vessels. For some reason, the pressure in those blood vessels is going to be a lot higher. And if you're measuring it and it's getting above 120, we start to take notice. Or when relaxation, if it's higher than 80, we start to pay more attention. So, how high is high blood pressure? I don't know if you can see that slide very well, but we've been speaking about that before, where the pressure of the blood is acting on the blood vessels. Now, I've been saying this a lot intentionally because this is what affects most of us, the pressure of the blood in the blood vessels, because that's the only where blood is in blood vessels. Their arteries, their veins, and their capillaries. And I want you to cast your imagination into the same hose pipe. Sometimes the pressure is so great that hose pipe starts to create little bulges. And sometimes it may have little leaks, and you may see the water coming out at the part where the pressure is highest. Just keep that in your imagination for a bit. But here we are. We're looking at a systolic pressure, whereas when the heart have contracted, they have forced the blood into the blood vessels, and we have measured it. Now it's above 140. So when that pressure is greater than 140, most doctors or any medical health personnel, they will definitely take a look and start to talk to you about your blood pressure. Or when the heart relaxes and the pressure is still very high, that is greater than 90 diastolically, we will start to take notice and talk to you about what you need to do. So higher than this, we say you have high blood pressure. Now, I can go on and talk about all the different types of high blood pressure. For example, I'll just give you very quickly, there's the primary hypertension or primary high blood pressure, and that's about 90% of the people that exists, 90% of the people. And the real cause of this has not really been known as yet. Then there's secondary high blood pressure, which is about 10%. And most of the time we know of the cause. And sometimes the cause can be from your hormonal system, from your kidneys, from your blood vessels may have disorders in them. Remember the blood vessels? Or they may be because you're taking certain drugs. that may cause that blood pressure to go up. And when doctors see your blood pressure has gone above these target marks of 140 on 90, we start to classify in stages. There's stage 1, stage 2, stage 3, and stage 4. So if you're seen with stage 4 hypertension immediately, you're going to be sent to the hospital straight away, or that person is going to start immediate investigations. And that is where we're talking about blood pressure greater than 180 on 120. That is very high. And then there's stage 2 and stage 3. There's also something we call the white coat effect. Now, sometimes you go to the doctor and you are nervous in the doctor's office. You're even nervous walking to the doctor's surgery. And when you get there and they take your blood pressure, it's well above 140 or 90. And some medical personnel will recognize, he may be a bit nervous or she may be a bit nervous. Let's check your blood pressure at home and make sure that this blood pressure is really this high. And when you get home, your blood pressure is absolutely fine. So we call it the white coat effect because of the effect of being in the doctor's office. It just causes your blood pressure to be very elevated. But normally, it is okay when you are not in that setting. And then, of course, there's masked high blood pressure where it is normal at the doctor, and when you leave, for some reason, it is very high. And these are the type of blood pressures we want to be knowing about, which type you have, and how we go forward with its management. So 140 on 90 is more or less the point where we start to give you some form of treatment, whether it's medical or it's advice. So your heart is under pressure to put that blood out around the blood vessels. And the more pressure your heart is under, the more problems that pump is going to have. So if you look at the picture, you would notice that we have two hearts there. We have a normal heart, and we have a heart that has been subjected to high blood pressure. Now, I want you to imagine with me for 1 second that you're in the gym. Now, if you're in the gym and you're pumping weights every day, muscle, we can see that it's a lot thicker on the hypertensive heart than it is in the normal heart. And that heart muscle, when we look at it via scans and via the testing that we do, we can tell that the heart walls are very thick because the heart is working hard all the time. And that is called hypertrophy of the heart muscle. And you can see the difference in that photo. But some of you may be asking, so why all the fuss, doctor? It's just high blood pressure. Why are you wasting time on a Saturday evening telling us about this? Well, shall I not waste time and tell you about this? You may find out or you may not find out, but you may suffer the consequence, and that's the big problem. This high blood pressure is a big problem because sometimes you don't know you have high blood pressure. And we spoke about the blood pressure being raised and the pressure against the blood vessels. Now, I want you to imagine you have some very tiny blood vessels around your body, and that blood pressure is elevated like that. Now, some blood vessels can withstand the pressure, while others can't. And when they can't, they rupture. And if they are rupturing in very important organs, herein lies the problem. Now, I will get a bit deeper in that shortly, but I just want you all to know that high blood pressure, we all get it, including doctors, by the way. We probably get more high blood pressure than most people, but all of us do. But it becomes a problem when that pressure is sustained and maintained and not being relieved. There can become some problems here, or They may not be, but in a large percentage of patients, over time, sustained high blood pressure really can become a serious problem. Now, we were just talking about the blood system. We were just talking about the blood vessels. And this is why we fuss. We fuss because you have blood vessels in your brain. And I know you had a talk last week about brain health. And I was made to understand you all will be speaking about anger management. You have high blood pressure when you get angry, all the stress of life. You know, when you're having a little quarrel with someone, or you get very irritated because the person in front of you is driving too slow, or the wife hasn't cooked the food properly, or the kids wouldn't go to bed on time, or many reasons why we suffer stress and run up our blood pressure. And that blood pressure, with those small, tiny blood vessels that cannot take that pressure, they can become ruptured. If it happens in the brain, it's a stroke. Now, you've seen all the advertisements on television which talk about fast. Face, arms, smile, etc., and how to act very quickly. And then we talk about kidney damage. Now, you wouldn't ordinarily talk about your kidneys, and why should you? But you have some very small blood vessels in the kidneys that are responsible for the filtration of the impurities of your blood, and that goes into your urine. And when we rupture these blood vessels, then the kidneys cease to function properly, and that impurity cannot be excreted appropriately. We have kidney damage. Did I tell you about the eyes? Now, until you cannot see, you probably wouldn't value your eyes as much. But I assure you, until I started to wear these glasses, I really appreciated the true value of my eyes. And for you, keeping down your blood pressure will help you to appreciate your eyes even more, because you have even smaller blood vessels in your eyes. And sometimes we have to look deep into your eyes just to look at those blood vessels, and we can see where they have ruptured and are leaking the blood components in the eye. And when that is happening, your vision will be affected. Now, I do not want to sound like an alarmist or a doomsday guy, but I assure you, a lot of this is not reversible once it's started to happen. You can't suddenly repair the eyes from all the blood vessels that have been ruptured or the kidneys that have been damaged. It's very difficult to get back where you were if you suffer the damage. So, the famous old Caribbean saying, prevention is better than cure. Then we come on to cardiovascular diseases. Now I've shown you in a few slides back, the heart is under pressure. And the heart is not designed to function under that pressure constantly. And the heart too has little blood vessels that keeps it with all its oxygen and its function. And when you have high blood pressure mixed with all the other conditions, your heart, the main pumping organ from the body, then becomes compromised. Cardiovascular disease, eye problems, kidney problems, strokes, these are just some of the problems that can catastrophically affect your daily lives. From working all day, every day, to not working at all because you've been blinded. From working all day, every day, lifting bricks or driving, to not being able to drive at all because you've had a stroke or a heart attack. Or spending loads of time, 3 times a week, getting your blood purified because your kidneys have been damaged irreparably. And these are the things that we try to avoid. Now, I know in England at this point in time and around the world, there are massive conditions going on, a big pandemic. It's called COVID. But we must not forget here that all the other diseases are still continuing, and we need to be very vigilant that we are not so much worried about COVID that we neglect our health. That is the other aspects of our health, how we eat, how we sleep, how we rest, our blood pressure, etc. Because they too will have a major factor in how you actually survive. So We've spoken about the main ones and other conditions that come about because of high blood pressure, things like dementia. Because of all the rupturing of blood vessels, you have something called vascular dementia. You have a lot of mini strokes in your brain. Your brain will cease to function how it used to be. There are aortic aneurysms where the main blood vessel that disseminates the blood from the heart going down the body sometimes have little pockets. And these aneurysms sometimes rupture. And a large percentage of people do not come back after they have an aneurysm rupture. Now, I wouldn't dwell on that too much, but if we look at this, this is what I was just talking about. Over here, we have a normal aorta. The little curved part at the top, it have just come out the heart. And this aorta is the descending aorta, how it comes down the body, and blood vessels leave it to go to various organs. And those little outpoutings are called aneurysms. And they tend to be more prevalent around 50, 60, 70, and higher frequency in men. So if the man is very stressed and have a history of high blood pressure, I'm certain his GP will be talking about him or getting at least a screen at some point in time. Now, and that's a real life picture. I don't want to gross anybody of an aortic aneurysm. And those little red parts in the eye is not what I'm looking at. We actually look in through the pupil. That's the dark part in the center, where we look at the retina to see how the blood vessels are doing in relation to your blood pressure. And here comes the picture now, where we now look at a normal eye. That is after we've looked in through the dark part, or what we call the pupil. And then we look here at a hypertensive eye, where we start to see there are little blots and spots, and there's some thinning. And you will see some bleeding. When it says hemorrhage, that means bleeding. That means those blood vessels are starting to rupture. The little white parts are called exudates, or cotton wool spots. That means some parts are being starved of blood because the supply line have been interrupted. It's very important when your blood pressure is so high that your vision is compromised. Now, I've spoken about the kidneys, I've spoken about the heart, I've spoken about the eyes, I've spoken about the brain in terms of dementia. Now, I'm certain at home I'll let you digest this one for 10 seconds, 5 seconds, 2 seconds, and I know you know exactly what that is. That's a stroke in representation. And if we look at the heart, if the heart itself starts to suffer the effects of high blood pressure, where some of his blood vessels are being damaged or the heart wall structure is starting to change, your heart will cease to function in a way that it's supposed to. So pumping normally wouldn't happen. So I think at this point in time, I will take a short break and take some questions.
Thank you, Dr. Roach. Some questions have come in. One of them, how does one reduce blood pressure when a person is constantly under intense stress at work?
I'm certain if I had the answer to that one, I wouldn't be practicing GP today. I'll be at the side of Tesco. One of the main reasons of high blood pressure is stress. There's no doubt about that, because stress brings out certain hormones, adrenaline, that causes your blood vessels to reduce not the volume, but the lumen size. And if the space gets smaller and it's the same volume of blood, up goes the pressure, because it's going to have more pressure to get through. And stress is a major factor for many, many health conditions. How do you reduce that? I'm certain you know the answer to this, but I will give you some useful hints, I think. One of them is to try to avoid the stressful source. That may sound simple, but one has to avoid what's causing you the stress. There's no magic pill to take for stress. It's avoiding it. Number two, if you are unable to physically avoid it, then you have to try to get some kind of help to help you to deal with the stress. There's counseling, there's guidance. I'm certain your work environment would provide health and well-being care for you. You should look at this if you are suffering abnormal amounts of stress. And then there is leave. You know, if you're suffering stress, your blood pressure is out of control, then you have to try to get your leave if you can. I can't advise you to take leave. This is something that you have to take up with your own HR department. But definitely avoidance of the trigger factor is the biggest way to get down the stress. Now, if you can't handle that, then it's about staying fit, eating healthy, that when the stress comes, all the other external factors are in check, that you can potentially deal from a blood pressure perspective, the stress that you may be facing.
Okay, thank you. Another question follows on from something you said there is, what kind of diet should I follow to help control my blood pressure?
Well, it's an interesting question, and some of these questions will be handled as we go on in the presentation, but I don't mind preempting it a bit. Everyone talks about salt, and that's the main part that I will hit on straight away. They say you need about 6 grams of salt a day. And that would obviously depend on the level of activity you're doing. So that's almost like a pinch of salt. Not a handful, not shake, 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 just a pinch. And that is one of the ways in which you can effectively lower blood pressure, is by reducing your salt content, because extra salt in the blood causes more water to come into the blood vessels, which increases the blood pressure. Salt also, what my mom used to say many years ago, salt hardens your arteries and causes you high blood pressure. I'm not even sure of that mechanism, but what I can tell you is that it causes more fluid to come into the blood vessels and increases the pressure on those blood vessels, which increases your pressure. So reducing your salt content is one important step. Another important step is when we talk about the lumen, that's the space within the blood vessel, we want to keep that as clear as possible so blood can pass through. So we do not want deposits of material. What type of deposits? Cholesterol deposits. So if you like a highly fatty diet and you're a smoker and things like that, the extra cholesterol you're taking, some of it is not good, will start to deposit in these blood vessels, reduce the space for the blood to flow, therefore increasing the pressure, automatically increasing your blood pressure and giving you higher risk of things like stroke and heart attack. So the two things that we've talked about already are reducing your cholesterol. We've talked about reducing your salt.
Thank you. And another question is high blood pressure hereditary?
Well, hereditary is a very strong word, but what I will say is that if you and your family and other members of your family have had high blood pressure, there's a very good chance that you will have high blood pressure. There's no guarantee that you will get it, but there's a good chance that you can if your mom or dad or somebody in your first degree family have had this blood pressure. In addition to that, some races are more predisposed to high blood pressure. For example, African and Caribbean, or Black African, Black Caribbean, that race and Asian tend to have a higher predisposition towards high blood pressure. Also your age. Initially, men have high blood pressure all the time, up to about 60. And then the women take over. Once the menopause starts to kick in, the pressure of women starts to increase. So women will take over and have higher percentages, about 60, 70, while the men can be as early as 20, all the way up to 50. And it's unfortunate, but we have seen a lot of men suffering more heart attacks than we see women. And a lot of this have to do with the background high blood pressure that they never checked out in the first place.
Okay, thank you. And another question is, if someone has high resting pulse rate, is this an indication that your blood pressure may be also high?
Well, if you tell me that you have a high resting pulse rate, first of all, I would want to know what is that pulse rate. And normally a pulse rate is between 60 and 100. So if it's high and resting and that means it's over 100, it may not necessarily mean that your blood pressure is high. It could mean that there are other things happening in the background. It could be hormonal, for example. Your thyroid function could be out of sync. Or if you're taking medication, it could be as a result of medication you're taking. Or it could be a result of an external source, such as stress, which will automatically raise your anxiety state, increase your heart rate, and your heart rate is resting at a much higher than normal. It can also mean that there can be some blood pressure involvement, but apart from checking your blood pressure, I am certain whoever is investigating you will be looking at the hormonal influence and checking all the other external factors. They'll also be checking to see if you're taking in any medication.
Okay, and another question is it possible to come off meds using a special diet, even if your high blood pressure is inherited from both parents?
That goes back to the very first thing. Now, clearly that person believed that they have inherited high blood pressure. I would say that they were more predisposed because their family had it in the first place, and clearly some factors had to contribute towards them developing high blood pressure at some point in time, whether it's age-related, whether it's medication-related, whether it's diet, whether it's health. There's so many factors that may have contributed. Now, I've known people via diet and via exercise to reduce their medication, because the fitter you become, the less your heart has to work just to pump the blood. If you can reduce the cholesterol in your diet, reduce the depositions and stuff like that, your blood pressure medication can be reduced. I believe that eventually people actually come off blood pressure medication, but this is something that has to be monitored strictly. You have to be in conjunction with a health professional, and you have to follow very careful steps to ensure that you're doing the right thing in order to reduce your blood pressure medication, one, and two, not for reoccurrence or that you're causing other secondary damage.
Okay, and one more question for this section. Are there any physical signs that shows high blood pressure?
Again, we will look at this as we go on. There are some signs, and when I get to that, clearly you'll be well ahead. But many a time, there is no sign that you have high blood pressure, and that's the danger here. When you do not have signs, but the pressure is raging in the background. Now, before we jump on to the next part, I want you all to imagine for one moment. You're driving along the road, and suddenly the road disappears from under your car. A sinkhole have occurred, just like that. Or you're sleeping in your bed, and you hear a crashing sound, and by the time you get out, your whole house have disappeared down a big hole. And in a lot of ways, that's how high blood pressure works. All along, it's banging away on all the organs of your body, and without warning, a blood vessel ruptures. You get a stroke, or you end up with a heart attack. And then you check, whoa, I've been having high blood pressure for a long time. Similarly, the water is eating away underneath the road, erosion is happening, and without warning, the sinkhole occurs. That is how high blood pressure can affect you. There are some signs such as headache. Some people may get blurred vision if their eyes are being affected. If the blood pressure is very high in the head, you can end up with headaches. But for the most part, many people do not know that they have high blood pressure. And that is why we spend a lot of time on high blood pressure. It's prevention, it's diagnosis, and most times you go to a GP, I'm certain they're taking your blood pressure just to make sure that you are not one that's being missed. Shall we continue? So we just looked here at the stroke, and we can see here from the heart attack, and we've spoken about how these things come about. And this little organ that we're looking at is the kidney. And again, the kidney is there for filtering, but the impurities from the blood. But as the blood pressure goes up and there's more damage in the kidney surface can change. And this is one of the external features of the kidney that can indicate that there's some semblance of high blood pressure going on. I just spoke to you about depositions within the blood vessels, and you will look here and you will see that the blood vessels of the heart if there's a blood vessel you want to keep very clear, it's the heart blood vessel. This is the main pump of the body. Again, I love to use illustration. You're driving your car, and that engine becomes clogged. Your car stops in the middle of the M25. That's it. Because the pump that is filtering your gas is full of debris, your car stops, doesn't drive. Similarly, if the blood vessels that are supporting your heart becomes blocked and clogged, heart attacks come about. They become starved of oxygen, intense chest pain can come about, and you're stopped in your tracks. You're not going anywhere from that, except you get very rapid intervention. And then we look on other pictures where we see a normal heart and an enlarged heart from one that has been working very hard to keep the blood pressure going. So, you asked me about some of the symptoms you can suffer if you're having high blood pressure. And these are some of the symptoms listed out for you. They can be dizziness, they could be blurred vision, they can be headaches, there can be some level of confusion. You can have increased sleepiness, you can have increased breathlessness. Depending on which structure is affected, you can have some symptoms. But a lot of the times, by the time you get to these symptoms, a lot of damage have already been done. You don't suddenly get high blood pressure and all these symptoms just come about. A lot of the time, it's because this high blood pressure has been going on for some time. There's some established damage already. So, the only way to know is to get yourself checked. And again, I've mentioned this, but repetition is good for the memory. Only these symptoms affect a small amount of people. Very small. So high blood pressure, which is HBP there, many times you have no symptoms. Your kidneys are damaged and you don't know until we do a blood test and see that your kidneys are failing miserably, but you don't know. There's sometimes, in a large percentage of the cases, they have no symptoms. Many times I've taken blood pressure in the surgery and I've had to ask the patient, can you go home and do a week's reading for me twice a day? And when they come back, they're alarmed that their blood pressure being high all week and we have to look to start medication and stuff like that, only because this pressure is raging and they didn't know. No signs or symptoms, just from a random blood pressure check. And that is why high blood pressure is also known as the silent killer. The silent killer. So, someone asked about risk factors. Apart from association with first-degree family members, people that are overweight, people that don't exercise enough, because when you exercise, you give your heart a good strength. You exercise the muscle, it works well. You don't exercise, it can't handle the pressure. There's too much salt, you know. I don't mean to bash any Jamaicans listening, but my wife is also Jamaican, so I'm certain that she's going to take this a little hard. But there's something that Jamaicans like to talk about, food being fresh. So if you're not putting salt in that food, it's too fresh. So I'm not saying Jamaicans alone, but they'll use to like that term, too fresh. And they throw a lot of salt on that food. Every time they eat salt and jerk sauce. Salt and jerk sauce. Salt, salt, salt. Pressure goes up. And you do this every single day. There's a very high chance that your blood pressure will go up at some point in time. Fortunately for Adventists, they're not normally consumers of alcohol, but you may have friends that do. And the use of alcohol is one of the factors which can also raise your blood pressure, along with all the other problems that come with the use of alcohol. And naturally, smoking. Again, we don't smoke, but smoking is so bad for you that if you look at a cigarette box now, they're showing you on the box what it is doing to you. But yet, people will smoke all day and all night, and they prefer that to pure oxygen, which is God-given. And this smoking causes the blockages. It helps to cause the blockage of the arteries, which increases the blood pressure, among other problems, not to mention the cancers, the lung disease, all these different things. Now, there's good news. The risk factors we just spoke about can all be modified. You can avoid smoking. You can cut out alcohol. You can exercise. You can lose some weight. You can eat properly. These are the things that you can actually action. You can do something about it. And in that light, you can increase your chance of having a lower blood pressure, a more normal blood pressure regularly. Unfortunately, there are some factors that are not easily modifiable. You cannot change your age. No matter how much you dye your beard, you're still going to get older and older. You can't change your family history, because if you're going to be higher predisposed, if your family has high blood pressure, you suddenly cannot change your race from black to white. That is not going to happen. So, and if you're a male, you just suddenly cannot change to a female just like that. Have to be very careful with what I say. However, males tend to have higher blood pressure than females until females are later on in life. Males are more predisposed to high blood pressure. Black race, African and Caribbean, the older you get, the pressure is raised some more. And to that end, we have to constantly monitor our elderly folk. Imagine, in your 40s you have high blood pressure. How do you think that blood pressure is going to be when you turn 60? Lower or higher? Turn 70. More than likely it will go up. Therefore, managing it early will help you to have a peaceful older life. And very early, we spoke about the types of high blood pressure. And I came back to this slide just so that I don't want you to feel, oh man, the doctor is just bashing me. Some people have other disorders. You know, they may have adrenal disorders. That's a little gland that sits at the top of the kidney. They may have their own kidney problems, which may unfortunately cause their blood pressure to go up. And then there's some women that take contraceptive pills. Now, and there are some people who are forced to take steroids because of different respiratory conditions or different rheumatological conditions, and certain medications, certain painkillers. All these factors can drive your blood pressure up, and knowing about it is very important. I'm certain that when you go to your GP would explain that these are some of the side effects of the medication you're taking, or the conditions that you have. One of the side effects is that one of the problems that can complications will be high blood pressure. I'm certain they will tell you that. Or you can ask, what type of complications would I be suffering? Now, in this talk so far, we've spoken largely about kidneys, heart, brain, blood vessels. We've spoken about all these things. Hence, diagnosing high blood pressure must revolve around these major organs. You want to know if there's any damage, if they're functioning well. Apart from checking physically your blood pressure, we can check your urine, we can check your blood to see if your kidneys are functioning well. We can look at the hormonal function to make sure they're in good sync. If we do not think your blood pressure is being caused by, let's say, some external force, we can see if it's hormonal, if it's a secondary cause. And to that end, getting yourself checked would lead to more testing or no testing. You never get yourself checked. No one is going to say, hey, let me check your blood pressure and dip your urine. Nobody's going to do that for you except you go and get yourself checked, especially if you know in your family is predisposed. Besides your urine, we can look at the function of the heart. We've spoken about the heart. Then there's the function of the heart. So the little stickers they put on your chest, we can look at the heart tracing, and from the size of the spikes or the width of the waves, we can detail how the heart is functioning. If the heart muscle is big, if the heartbeat is too fast, if the heart have had a heart attack before. This is just measuring the electrical activity of the heart, and high blood pressure can alter that electrical activity, and that is recorded via an EKG or ECG that the doctors sometimes request for you. So, you can do some things about it. I've spoken to you about your diet. I've spoken to you about some vices that some people listening may have. Cutting down your alcohol, cutting it out if possible, cutting out your smoking, reducing your salt, increasing your exercise, having a healthier diet where your cholesterol levels are down and that you're eating healthy cholesterols. But all of that comes with the science of it. You have to know why you're doing this. So it's important to know your numbers. Know what you're checking. If I do your blood pressure now, and it's 130 on 70, are you going to run away thinking you have high blood pressure? Or from this discussion already, you will know that 140 and 90 is where we start to get very concerned. Automatically say, oh, blood pressure is okay. But if I check your pressure now and it's 180 on 120, you will say, Doc, I think there may be a problem, and the doctor would agree with you just because you knew some numbers. And we are looking at 140 and 90, and for some diabetics, we want to keep it even lower than that because their condition predisposes them to even more problems. So, checking your urine, doing the blood test, looking at the ECG, that's how we're checking you. That little device on the arm is called a sphygmomanometer, and that checks your blood pressure, and we know the number is there. Reducing your salt. I'll keep repeating this and banging on about this all day long. Reducing your salt. But here we go with a little bit more specifics. Even before you attempt big sets of exercise, one has to start smartly and slowly. I would never advise anybody to get out there and start running marathons. It doesn't work like that. You have to build up. 30 minutes, most of us do more than 30 minutes of walking every day. But if we concentrate and do a 30 minutes religiously, that is, get on your phone, talking to Mr. Tom, you can walk 15 minutes from your home. It may take you 15 minutes to walk back. That's 30 minutes, and it's the same time it will take to watch one of those movies that take 2 hours. You can do it 4 times. So 30 minutes at least 5 times a week. Walking. It's a very good way. Comfortable shoes, comfortable clothing. Be safe as usual. 30 minutes a day, and you'll realize that your stamina is improving. You're doing it a lot easier. You may not be out of breath. And over time, if you keep doing that, you may be able to increase your walking time, and your blood pressure will be improving. Your overall health will be improving. And then there's the fruit and vegetables. I cannot overestimate how important having the right fruits and vegetables in your life are. For a long time, vitamins, antioxidants, and we can talk about the fiber and the roughage, which is important for good bowel activity. The vitamins is so important, fruits and vegetables, and they give you natural sugars as well. And I will repeat again for about the millionth time. Smoking and alcohol, just leave it out. That's the sugar. You know, we go to most restaurants in this day and age, and all we can see plastered on the board is everything fried. Fried chicken, fried wings, fried chips. You name it, it's fried. And besides that, you see them shaking the salt. Because if they serve you without salt, the people will complain it's too fresh. So you get a lot of salt, you get a lot of fry. 2 very bad combinations for poor cardiovascular health later on. And looking at this picture, that's a blood vessel that have been clogged. That's the plaque that have built up in the arteries. And can you imagine, blood still has to flow through that. That's tremendous amount of pressure. The heart has to work even harder to push the blood through that small space. But not only is high blood pressure a risk here, there's also little clots because the blood isn't flowing smoothly anymore. It's more turbulent, and clots can be generated, which can also cause the same heart attacks, the same strokes, the same pulmonary embolisms in your lungs. So many problems can come about if your blood vessels are all clogged. And if we see those sweet peppers and carrots there, we'll know what we need to get in. So, your heart is smiling when you're eating properly and exercising. The heart is having a hard time when you're doing everything else that is not good for you. This next slide, if it will go over, it's very important. I know you saw the guy with a slightly enlarged abdomen, but this is the part I want you to understand. It is directly associated with how big your abdominal girth is. If you have a massive abdominal girth, you increase your risk of heart problems exponentially. So the smaller the waist, again, less heart problems. So for men, again, more numbers. So if you're at home, get your tape measures out. Around the navel, if you're more than 102, you're going to have a little problem, or you are increasing your risk of problems. I shouldn't speak in absolutes. And for a woman, it's 88. So more than 88, you are increasing your risk. And for men, it's 102. So by the time I'm finished here, all of you out there in internet land should have known a few numbers: 140 and 90, 102, 88. You should have a very good idea of a few basic numbers. 6 grams of salt, 30 minutes of exercise. Loads of information is coming in your direction, but it's a very small amount of information. It looks like loads, but it's actually a small amount that can effectively change your life in relation to blood pressure. Know your numbers, very important. The other thing is to know if you're a diabetic or not. I mentioned briefly a while ago that people with diabetes complicate matters badly. And with high blood pressure and diabetes, it's a recipe for disaster generally. So knowing if you're diabetic or not is essential in your management. I'm certain your GP will be on you, your health professional will be on you even more. They'll be trying to keep your blood pressure and your blood sugars in check, because the complication of these, generally stroke, heart attacks, etc. And these are conditions that can affect you adversely, and sometimes the damages are irreversible. So knowing your diabetic status is very, very, very important. What do you want is the big question. What do you want? Do you want a life that's full of pills every day, morning and evening, lying in the bed with tons of tubes after you've had a major stroke or heart attack? You know, I've had a friend, he only just died a year ago, he was 57, my good friend. He was what we call a miserable man. He used to argue and fuss about everything under the sun. We're playing volleyball, he'll argue if I spike the ball too hard. If he wins a point, he will still argue. And he was very brilliant. And while working in his office, he went home, had a big headache, but he did not know he had high blood pressure. He did not know. And he had a major bleed in the brain and died a week and a half later, a year ago. All I'm saying to you guys, know your numbers, get checked. Is it a life of pills, a life of tubes, or is it a nice peaceful life where you are enjoying your family? Thank you.
Thank you, Doctor. There's some final set of questions that have come through. Is high blood pressure reversible through exercise and lifestyle changes?
Well, high blood pressure is definitely modifiable via exercise and lifestyle changes. These are some of the risk factors that we put out, the modifiable risk factors that you can definitely improve on. So 30 minutes a day, 5 days a week, eating properly, healthy choices. I'm certain you all have been exposed to numerous seminars, over the years in this church, where people are talking about healthy diet all the time. If you are eating healthy and properly, avoiding stressful situations and exercising, you can definitely reduce your blood pressure and you can avoid getting high blood pressure.
Okay, thank you. Another question, do high blood pressure tablets treat the illness or suppress it? And can you come off them once you've started taking them?
Well, you can reduce the medication you're taking, you can. And the high blood pressure medication, they're just not going to take away high blood pressure. Some blood pressure medication causes your blood vessels to dilate like that to allow the pressure to be reduced. But when the medication's worn off, the blood vessels come back, the pressure goes up. That's why you need to take it every day. The cholesterol tablets drop the cholesterol, which helps to clear out those arteries. And there are other blood pressure medications which work on other mechanisms to reduce their effect that your blood pressure does not go up. It's important that you take your medication to reduce your blood pressure while working on the factors that you can change. The exercise, the diet, the smoking, the alcohol, the salt content, the rest, the avoidance of stress. These are the type of things that you can do to reduce your blood pressure, and the rest, I'm afraid, are not really changeable, but why worry when we can pray?
Okay, thank you. Another question is, you mentioned that salt reduction, while other medical persons say eliminate salt. However, I have been advised that salt is required in the body. What type of salt is advisable?
Well, there's a big debate. Eliminating salt completely from your diet is very tricky because you do need salt for a lot of function of the electrochemical processes in the body. And believe it or not, the majority of food that you buy have some salt content. Look at the label. You can't just avoid it in today's society. You can reduce how much you physically put in to ensure that you are not giving yourself too much. Now, everybody speaks about Himalayan salt, which have more properties, it's cleaner, it's better for you. Himalayan salt, they say it's good for you, but I'm saying a pinch of any salt, because before Himalayan salt came about and other people were using it, other people just use normal iodized salt, which have a bit of iodine, which helps with thyroid function. 6 grams a day, that's all you need. Some people may need more, some people may need less. Some people have conditions which cause them to secrete a lot of salt from their body, and they themselves may need to take higher salt intake. It all varies. What is important is that you are not taking in more than you need, or more that will cause your blood pressure to go up because of the choice that you've made. Himalayan salt, you can look it up. Iodized salt is a good one. Sea salt is a good one. Either way, too much of any of that type of salt will not be good for you.
Thank you. Another question is, can intake of milk also increase blood pressure?
Tricky, I don't know, is the first answer I will say. I know milk has protein. I know it's depends on which type of milk you're talking about as well. There's almond milk, there's oat milk, there's cow's milk. And all of them are highly proteinaceous, some of animal origin, some of plant-based. So in terms of the blood pressure, I will lean towards no, but if it has a high amount of salt, more than the 6 grams in every serving, definitely you're leaning towards pushing up your blood pressure. But in general, milk causing high blood pressure, I would tend to think not. That is what I would say, except somebody can prove to me scientifically that it does.
Thank you. A person who has low blood pressure for 50 plus years in a busy work environment of say 100/65 or 105/70 at the highest, are there problems with the organs associated with this, or should they not worry?
Well, if you're operating at a low blood pressure like that, that's pretty good. High blood pressure, again, something I could say is varying. So for a person that is having 105 on 60 and these type of things, if they should suddenly be at 130 or 90, that is going to be high for them, because it's more than 20 mmHg, that's millimeters of mercury higher than normal. That is going to be high blood pressure for them because they operate at such low levels of blood pressure, such low values. So it's important that if they should develop headaches and stuff like that, they should get it checked and they should monitor this thing on a frequent basis. Also, if they're operating at that sort of low pressure, just make sure that they are not taking too much medication. If they're taking medication, something that's keeping their blood pressure too low. But in terms of organ damage, if you've operated like this all your life, there's a very low probability that you would have organ damage. That is your functional blood pressure. I can't see why you would suddenly be damaged from that. But you could be damaged if this pressure starts to go up more than 20 of the normal low value. You have to start to monitor that.
Thank you. Another question. Can you say a little bit about postural hypotension?
Well, postural hypotension is a condition that happens like this. Sometimes, as we get older, and we all will, there are certain receptors in our throat and in our head that tells us when we're standing and when we're sitting. And as we change our position from lying to standing, it keeps the blood pressure stable all the way. And that happens when we're youthful, like us. But when we get older, or we are on certain medication, those receptors do not work as well. So when you're lying down and you suddenly stand up, whoa, I'm dizzy here, until that blood pressure normalizes. What happens is, you're lying down, your blood pressure is maintaining a certain amount of pressure, is at its lowest state because the heart doesn't have to work at all. The moment you stand up, the blood pressure is not maintained. As a matter of fact, it drops. And when it drops, your brain perfusion drops off and you get dizzy. It's trying to tell you, lie down quick. That's why postural hypertension then can be diagnosed. If we measure your blood pressure lying, then we measure your blood pressure sitting or standing, we can see if there's a drop when you change from a lying position to a sitting position. And if it is, then we start to look at some of the factors that can contribute to postural hypertension, such as 1, dehydration. We've had a lot of heat here. So if you're not well hydrated, you can suffer postural. Number 2, certain medications that you're taking, certain blood pressure medications. And there's a lot of ways for us to investigate to try to get you back on even keel. But one of the primary symptoms is moving from a sitting or lying to a standing position with dizziness and sometimes collapse.
Thank you. And the final question, how often should you check your blood pressure?
Well, if you're maintaining a good, healthy life, I mean, once a year is always good. If you're a person that's hypertensive and under control, the GP will tell you next year, don't forget your blood pressure check. And if you regularly checked and you're healthy all the time, you can potentially do it every 5 years. But these machines are very cheap now. Just about everything in medicine, 25 to 30 pounds, you can buy your own blood pressure machine, do your own blood pressure check-in, make sure you're doing it correctly, and check your blood pressure yourself. Try to know your numbers, and if you think it's above what it's supposed to be while you're at home, do let your GP know. Do let your GP know, and they will take it from there. There's one more slide. I always use this text, and we just want to remember that your body is a temple, and the way you treat it will determine how it reacts and behaves. If you treat it really well, your body will respond really well. And it reminds us, your body is a temple of the Holy Spirit who is in you. Are you going to treat the Holy Spirit bad? No, you're not. You're going to treat the Holy Spirit really good, which is in this case in your body, because you were bought with a price. Therefore, honor God with your body.
What a fantastic presentation, Doc. As a matter of fact, not only was your presentation admired, but somebody says, what a fantastic tie, Doc. Oh. I really like that. but I'm sure those of you online, this is our highest viewership so far online and on YouTube. The numbers are going way up. If you just type and say thank you to the doc, we really appreciate your fantastic presentation. I'm sure. Are you willing to come back again? Would you like him to come back? If you would like him to come back, I'm sure he's very happy to come back and to speak on another topic of his choice and of your choice. So please, just send me a thank you, Doc. I can see people, Harvey, saying thank you, and I'm sure a lot more will be coming in. So thank you, sir, and we were really blessed by your presentation. I will reduce my salt. I will start doing at least 30 minutes exercise each day.
Just walking.
And I'm sure others will also join and do the same thing. So we thank you very much, and I will not drink any milk. Well, right. But thank you for that, and we were really blessed. So let's have a prayer. Father, we thank you for Dr. Roach traveling all the way from the other side of London just to be with us, to share his knowledge with us. From Croydon perspective, we want to have healthy people. And so many of us are suffering from blood pressure issues. May we take the points that he has made, and may we use them sensibly to make ourselves as healthy as we can. May your Spirit bless him and Charmaine and the 2 children. And Lord, as he continues to be a blessing to others through the medical ministry, keep him well, keep him safe. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen.